All right, today we are going deep. We're going to map out the hidden legal operating system that quietly runs the world. It's called the chain of title, and trust me, it defines way more of your life than you could ever imagine.
So let's just start with the biggest question there is. Who really owns the world? I'm not talking metaphorically. I mean, who legally on paper has the title? The answer to that? Well, it might just change how you see everything around you.
To really get this, you have to understand that we've been following two huge, powerful ideas through history. On one side, you have Parens Patriae, this idea of authority over people, where the state is kind of like the ultimate parent. On the other side, you've got the doctrine of discovery, which is the claim of authority over land, over territory. One comes from ancient theology, and the other, get this, comes from a well-documented forgery. Each one on its own is incredibly powerful.
Now, for 1,000 years, these two big ideas pretty much ran on separate tracks. I mean, they shaped entire kingdoms, but they were still distinct concepts. And then, 1493 happens. And that's when everything changes. The two threads are twisted together, braided into one single heavy chain of authority.
Okay, so that brings us to the whole structure. What you're about to see is the unbroken chain of title that has been shaping global power for more than 500 years.
Let's just walk through the handoffs. It all kicks off in 1493 when the Pope basically sells the rights to newly discovered lands and peoples to the kings and queens of Europe. Fast forward to the 1600s, and you have Protestant lawyers who launder this title. They strip out the religious stuff to make it look like secular law. By 1823, it gets woven right into the U.S. Constitution by the Supreme Court. And here's the kicker. As recently as 2005, that same court confirmed it's still valid. This is not ancient history, folks. This is living law.
And that's the thing you absolutely have to grasp. It is one unbroken line of transfer. A line that starts with a proven fraud and stretches directly into the legal reality of your life, right here, right now.
You know, we usually think of different parts of the law as being completely separate, right? Property laws over here, corporate laws over there. But what if they aren't? What if they all actually grow from the exact same root? Let's take a look at how this one chain branches out into, well, pretty much everything.
So here it is. This is the architecture of that power. Think of it like a giant tree. The root, the foundation of it all, is dominion, this claim of absolute lordship by a sovereign power. And from that one single root, you get all these branches of modern control. The deed to your house, your kid's birth certificate, the charter for a business, the entire body of federal Indian law. See, they're not separate systems. They're all just different expressions of that one single foundational claim of ownership.
Okay, so if we follow this logic all the way through, it leads to a really direct and, honestly, a pretty personal question. If the state holds the ultimate title to the land and has ultimate authority over the people, then what exactly does that make you in this system?
Well, according to the cold, hard logic of this legal framework, your position is pretty clear. You're a tenant on the land, you're not an absolute owner, you're a ward of the state, not a totally sovereign individual. And in the grand scheme of things, you are basically an asset in the massive portfolio of the nation state.
So how do we live inside this system? We're all taught in school about the social contract, right? But maybe there's a better way to describe it. Let's reframe it. What if it's not a contract, but a user agreement?
We love to imagine this social contract, where we're all sovereign citizens coming together and it guarantees our inherent rights. But the reality of how it functions, it looks a lot more like a user agreement. In that model, you're a user or a subject, and you don't have inherent rights. You have permissions that are granted to you by the administrator and can be changed or even taken away.
And make no mistake, the structure of this agreement is a one-way street. Authority flows from the top down, from the original crown or sovereign, down to its colonies, which became the modern state, all the way down to the county or city you live in.
Let's make this super concrete. Think about the average property tax in the US. It's something you have to pay every single year, like clockwork, for the entire time you own your home. Which of course leads to a really fundamental question. If you have to pay a yearly fee to a higher authority just to keep your property, is that really ownership? Or is it just rent that you're paying to the true landlord, the state?
And here's why it feels like that. It's because, legally, the chain of title for your home doesn't end with you. It goes all the way back to the state. And as we've already seen, the state's own claim to that title goes back to a foundation that was built on a documented fraud.
This forces us to get really clear about two different words, power and authority. See, power is just the raw ability to make you do something. But authority, that's the legitimate right to make you do something. So if the original claim to that right is fraudulent, does the modern state have real authority, or does it just have power? So we've mapped out the whole family tree of this thing. We've seen where it comes from. And this chain of titles seems incredibly strong, almost unbreakable. But you know what they say about chains? No matter how big and heavy they are, they're only as strong as their weakest link.
And this chain, it has a very specific vulnerability. That weak link is your consent. It's the one piece of this whole puzzle, this whole structure of domination that absolutely requires your participation, whether you're active about it or not. The system just can't work without it.
And that, right there, brings us to the final, most important question. We understand the chain now, we see its power, and we just pointed out its weakness. The entire thing hinges on our participation. So the only real question left to ask is, what happens when consent is withdrawn?